if you just look at the task of making that transaction, sometimes just talking about the transaction only gives you a little bit of power. But if you could expand it into some other areas you can impact, now you're adding additional value that maybe your competitors can't. But you can't do that if you don't ask the right questions to get into those conversations.
Welcome back to the Sales Gravy Podcast. This is Jeb Blount, and I'm with the infamous Ron Karr, the author of Velocity Mindset, and a renowned keynote speaker who has traveled all over the world speaking to sales and leadership teams. I've been trying to get Ron on the podcast for a very long time, so this is quite a treat. Before we get started, if you are looking to level up your sales game, if you're a team of people, if you're a small business, if you're an entrepreneur, go check out Sales Gravy University. Sales Gravy University is where 40 plus of the world's top sales experts have come together to create the most fundamentally massive, incredible collection of sales training and sales courses ever. It is truly the most powerful sales training engine on earth. And if you've never taken a course on Sales Gravy University, you can use the code free course. That's free course. If it's your first course, take any course you want. Go to Sales Gravy University. That's at learn.salesgravy.com, learn.salesgravy.com. Ron, welcome to Sales Gravy.
Thank you. How are you, Jeb?
I'm doing great. Hey, we had a lot to talk about and a lot to unpack. Before we get started, though, one of the things I'm interested in is a little bit about you. Like, how did you come to be the person running the business that you're running today? Like, can you just kind of give us a little bit of background? I mean, and start as far back as you want to, but I'm always interested in how people end up doing the things that they're doing now.
Well, we'll give you the unvarnished truth. How's that?
I like unvarnished truth. This is Sales Gravy. We pretty much live on the unvarnished truth.
So when I was a young kid, I had parents that loved me for sure, but my dad was, he was in the Holocaust, so he was impacted by it. And it's been documented that children of Holocaust survivors tend to have an abusive relationship because, they were kind of mentally impacted.
Yeah.
So nothing, and when I mean abusive, I'm not talking sexual, but I'm talking about verbal, I'm talking about physical, and you just couldn't do anything. And so I had no self-esteem, I had no confidence, I had nothing. I couldn't even go out. The ability to learn how to make relationships didn't happen until I was in college, and you can tell I was way behind the eight ball. But there was a couple of things that I dealt with when I was younger too. One was addiction issue, and I opened my keynotes with that a lot. I couldn't enunciate the letter R. And why they gave it a name that starts with the letter R, I have no idea. They call it rhoticism, or as I can only call it, oticism. But and then to have the name Ron Karr, I was set up for failure since the day I was born. So I was bullied a lot in school because you couldn't even enunciate your own name. So, I got tired of the pain. So I went to the school pathologist one day, and after 45 minutes, I stormed out because she had me putting my tongue in places that I never did, and it made sounds that scared me. So I stormed out, went back to my pain. And after another year, finally said, look, if you don't like the reaction to what's happening, you have to change the inaction. So what are you going to do differently? I learned that at an early age. So I decided that what was missing was I kept doing actions, but I didn't have a direction, meaning an end result. Where was I going for? And I said, I need to get rid of this thing because it's not good for my ego. It's not good for my confidence. It's not good for anything. So I found a really good pathologist in New York, went to her, and I said, can you really do this? She goes, yeah, but if you're just going to come here once a week and not practice in between, it's not happening. Now, whether it takes 6 months to a year, it depends on you. Well, it took us about a year and a half to get rid of it, but I did. And that became a big lesson. If you don't have a destination that is big enough, that is compelling enough, then you'll never get there. That's number one. Because there's things going to happen on our journey, like that first time I went to that pathologist, and you're going to be knocked on your butt. And I gave up for that year because at that point it wasn't big enough. But when the pain kept getting bigger and bigger, eventually got to that point where I had to do something. But why did I have to wait that year? Why did I have to wait the other 2 years before that? So I didn't know it then, but that actually started my forming the velocity mindset. Because when
Okay.
you think of velocity, Jeb, you think of what?
Fast.
Speed,
Yeah.
fast. That's what everybody says in my audiences, but it's not velocity. If that's all you think, you get burnout. Velocity is speed with direction, the end result. And what I found in 30 years of doing this, like you have, I've found that the biggest problem for salespeople, entrepreneurs, and executives is that they're not going after the right outcome.
Interesting. I saw that old Zig Ziglar story. He tells about this young man who's walking by, this old guy. He's sitting on the porch, rocking in his rocking chair, and dog's laying next to him. And the young man notices the dog is laying on a nail. And he looks at the old man and says, "How come that dog is laying on that nail?" And the old man looked down at the young man and says, "They don't hurt him bad enough." And I think that's the same thing. So you've decided that you've got a big enough direction that it's motivating you to do what the speech therapist says for you to do. What's next?
Well, and then it took a couple of, well, maybe a decade of deprogramming, uh, so I can get my confidence wings underneath me. I started in sales, and I started practicing it without even knowing it. My first sales job was a school of hard knocks selling copiers door to door.
Like, you talk to people who did that, those stories, like, if you could do that, you could sell anything.
Yeah, and again, it helped me with the velocity mindset, even though I didn't know it at that time, because my first job was selling the Royal 115 copier, which was the first copier that was plain bond, no more liquid, no more messing all your clothes, and you can change it real easy. And it did 15 crisp copies. And I said, "Where's the bigger unit? 6 months. Where's the collator? 6 months. The duplicator? 6 months. Everything 6 months." I had this one copier. I go and I kept getting the door shoving me outside. And after 3 months of not selling something, I decided to have a board meeting, which we talk about in the velocity mindset. And where do you do a board meeting, Jeb, in New Jersey? In a diner.
Right?
So I took me, myself, and I to the board meeting. And I said, "Okay, what's going on? I'm not getting any traction." "All right, what are you talking about?" Copy. All right. What's copiers do? What's the bottom line? It's a communication vehicle. Maybe start with that. That was the kind of conversation I had in that diner. Because if you don't do something different, you're going to have the same result. So I went back to the next person and I said, "Hey, would you agree with me that a copy is nothing more than a communication vehicle?" And Jeff, all of a sudden, the person thought I thought I was a therapist and she was laying on my couch. She goes, "Can I talk to you?" We have one copier on the fourth floor, the big one. Sally has to make one copy from the first floor. By the time she gets up there, talks to everybody, it's 45 minutes. I said, how much time is spent a week on that?" She goes, "Try 2 full-time employees." And I said, I'm not here to compete against that big copier. If you buy one of mine on every floor, I'll solve that problem. You'll get those 2 full-time employees. And I sold 3 at a time. I wasn't shooting big enough. I was trying to replace a copier for a copier. I couldn't compete with that big machine. I had to find a gap that they had that was so important to them that if I could fill it, they would still do business with me. And that's what I learned at that moment.
Love that. I love it. So, let's talk about this concept of a board meeting because you talk about this in the book, and it sounds like it's something that you mastered early on. It's unique. It's a unique perspective. I'll tell you that. So let's just say that you're a salesperson and you're listening to this, and you've hit a plateau, or you hit a wall, or you feel like you're not getting the results that you're capable of getting. And I feel like there's a lot of sales professionals right now in this moment in time are feeling that way because we've got the infiltration of AI into everything. The speed of business has increased at an exponential pace and it's not slowing down. And a lot of people are drifting just a little bit. So how do you do this board meeting and how can you use it to get yourself centered like you did and then refocus yourself?
Right. Well, the things like AI and other issues, they come second. The first thing is, what do you want to achieve for yourself? All right. If you're not happy with what you're achieving on an annual basis, what would make you happy? What would make you fulfilled? And it has to be specific and it has to be a stretch. If it's not a stretch, you're doing it already. So you're not going to do anything differently. One thing about the past, the biggest mistake that most people make when they do their New Year's resolutions is they try to create different results for next year by using what they did in the past. And all you're doing is creating the same results. You cannot do the same thing in the future as you did in the past. You can use the past to help you figure out what you want to deal with and not deal with so you don't make the same mistakes. But if you do it the same way, you're going to have the same stuff. And that's the biggest problem we all have. So the best way to change that is by honing down what you really want to achieve that's going to give you the juice. Let me give you a business example if I can. There was a major chemical manufacturer in Germany that had offices all over the world. And all their divisions brought me in the early 90s to give talks and sales. And one division brought me in, I did the talk, and I saddled up to the next VP. And I said, so what's your biggest issue? And he says, we spent 20 years creating this reagent for mining copper. It cut in half the cost of mining copper. When we bought it out in the 80s, most of the copper mines are going bankrupt. We saved them. I said, so what's the issue? The issue is how worldwide sales went up 60%, the worldwide demand, but the largest user, we only had 25% of the demand. And I said, and? He goes, well, their bids for all their mines, their 5 mines, are up next week, and we're meeting with the sourcing team. He said, can you help me prepare? I said, sure. First thing I asked them is, what do you want as my result? He goes, we want to win the bid. That, Jeb, is not looking big enough. All they did was bid every 3 years for lowest price, so it's based on lowest price. I said, is that what you want? He goes, no. I said, well, what do you really want? And that's when their passion came out. And that's when they said, why bid? We started this. We saved them. I said, so what do you want? We have 25%. We want 75% of the demand. I said, okay. You want a bid? No. What do you want? We want a negotiated agreement for 10 years. Why? That's the life of our patents. We want to maximize them. So let me see if I get this straight. You don't want to bid for lowest price every 3 years. You want to change the way they buy and get a 10-year negotiated deal. And they said yes. Then I looked at them and I said, you can do this if you really want to, but it takes a different set of actions. It takes different questions. It takes better questions. And you think you know your client, but you really don't. Are you ready to go on this journey with me? And they said yes, because they had no other choice. No one else talked to them like that, I guess, in a sense. And we went on that journey, and in 18 months, we repositioned them where they closed a $200 million 10-year deal. What was different? A bid is about certain characteristics that are present today. It doesn't allow you to solve problems of the future. You're dealing probably with somebody else's specs. But if you go in and ask better questions, the what if questions, if you could have anything you want, a different result, what would it be? How would it impact you? Things like that. Go into the future with these people. And what we found is the biggest issue with us, my client, they manufacture in Ireland. The other competitors are here in the US. So we got creative. We built a storage tank on site. It gave them 6 months of product. Then we gave them a disaster recovery plan to show that the factory gets bombed or whatever, a plane falls down. We can have product up in 6 months and they won't have a delta of no product. That sealed the deal because that became part of the bid. The other manufacturers are saying, what is this? And we called it a mine site services program. And when they said, we don't know what that is, it gave their customer the permission to take away the bid, and they changed the way that industry bought. So what I'm saying to your clients, if anybody's working on bids or whatever price they're saying they need, don't take it for granted. There's other things you can throw into that. If you uncover additional issues that are bigger and more powerful, here's the deal. If all you do is compete with everybody else on the same playing field, there's no room for differentiation. But if you expand the playing field to get into other issues that are bigger and more important, it gives you more room to create a powerful value proposition that will separate you from your competition.
Excellent. Very good. Great lesson. Okay, so you've had this board meeting with yourself in New Jersey in a diner. I'm sure that the people that were sitting next to you thought there's a man over there talking to himself. Maybe that's normal in New Jersey. You get some religion, you go back and you start becoming successful. What happens next in your life from there?
I started getting bored. You reach a certain level of success, and for people that are, achievers and all that, then you want to get to the next level. And I wanted the next level. So I went into management in the computer industry. And I was there for about 5 years before I decided to go on my own. Because at that time in the 80s, the computer industry was in a lot of turmoil. I worked for Control Data, number
Mhm.
84 in the Fortune 100, but they were a mid-frame specialist. Mid-frames were going away by the way of the laptop, which was coming out. So they went down to 250. Business was dying, but I still made my number. I was the only one in my division who exceeded my quota. And they lowered everybody else's quota, but I refused to take the lower quota. Why? Because their efforts will go down. I wanted my original quota because that was the only way I was going to have a shot to hit it. And by the way, in quota, what I always did, I added 25% to their number. Because this way, if I shot more
Yeah.
and I didn't make it, at least I was at that 100%. If all you're doing is shooting 100% and something comes and bites you in the butt you didn't expect, you're not making your quota.
Good point. So you're going on your own in the mid 80s.
Late 80s, yes.
So when you say go on your own, what do you mean by that?
I had a family emergency. My dad was terminally ill. He was towards the end of his life. And my mom, that was a senior vice president of Chase Manhattan Bank, a world-renowned economist, a woman ahead of her time. She had to care for him, but she wasn't taking care of herself mentally. She passed out at the wheel of the car one day, 3 blocks from the house, in front of a Porsche dealership. The car runs over a light pole, severs it. The jagged edge punctures the gas tank. The car caught fire. She caught fire. A salesperson and a customer run out of the Porsche dealership. They drag her out in flames, and the car blows, and it takes down the entire Porsche dealership.
Holy moly.
And Jeb, I always wanted to own a Porsche. Never thought I'd have 13 at once, but
Wow.
anyway, I had to deal with that, and I had to put the velocity mindset. Okay, what's a lot of emotion? The
Mhm.
biggest thing with velocity, the emotion gets in our way of making good decisions. So I say, what's the outcome? What do you need? I said, no matter what, both parents had to survive because I didn't want it on my shoulders that one didn't make it because my actions weren't strong enough, and they both did. But that taught me one thing: if you're not happy at work, the same thing, you better change it. And so I called my EVP up after the emergency ended. And he goes, "Yeah, I heard what you've been through. What's up?" I said, "Well, I realize I'm not really fulfilled here. And I think there's 1 of 4 ways we can go. I need your help. One is you change my product set, change my title, change my territory. We can't do those. Maybe I got to do something else." He goes, "Ron, I love you. I can't do the first 3." So he funded me. He said, "Give me a business plan." I started a sales training company, and he gave me some ideas, and he kept me on expenses till for another 4 months and paid my commissions coming in on my deals before I
Wow.
left for the rest of the year. So he basically funded me. I
Wow.
had a lot of gratitude for him in doing that. And I got my first client 3 weeks later, which was Pennsylvania Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Wow. And folks, if you're listening to this, the what strikes me is I started Sales Gravy, this company 18 years ago. And, I complained because Facebook was just emerging and LinkedIn was just emerging. And, a lot of the digital things, getting the website together, think about that mid 80s, there were like, it was just you. Like that was old school you. You had to pick up the phone, you had to make it happen, you had to get out in front of people, and you had to
I
convince
was
people
doing
that you,
2,000
yeah.
piece mailing campaign every week. Who do you think was licking, writing it, and mailing it? Me.
Wow. Okay, that's some grit. Hey, let me ask you. This is a strange question, but I have a lot of connection to this myself. You said that when you were, a child and you were coming up and you were having a hard time saying R and you had to go to speech therapy, that you got bullied a lot in school for that. How much did that experience of being bullied or ostracized or, pushed out on the outside, how much of that when you got into your business drove you internally?
It drove me in different ways. I mean, it obviously drove me. It's what I call a chip on my shoulder. And when you have a chip on the shoulder, it could do 1 or 2 things. It can drive you or it can hold you back. It depends on how you look at it. Uh, for me, it was always, well, I guess what I learned out of that, and it became too much. Any strength, if it's overused, becomes a weakness, was the phrase failure is not an option. That's what I learned because I couldn't have failure when I was young because I'd be opened up to a tremendous beating or whatever was coming my way. And that served me well, but if it's too much, where we become too much of a perfectionist and then that slowed me down a lot. So It served me well, what I went through, because I became a speaker for the wrong reason, actually.
Mhm.
I figured if I could be on stage and slay my dragons by being proverbially naked in front of the audience, then I made it and I got rid of all my fears. That's not true. That was being self focused. That didn't help the audience. I learned from speaking from NSA, National Speakers Association, that it's not about you, it's about them. And if you make it audience centric, like the biggest mistake people make when they tell stories is they start with the story. And we don't know as listeners how to track it. They should start with what the point is first, then tell the story so we can track where they're going, but then give the application what it means to us. They leave the application out. So they leave the impact of the
Yeah.
story out. And that I learned through that whole process also. But it was a journey of what a speaker was, but I started it for the wrong reason. And then I developed into it for the right reasons.
I like that. So you started this training company in the mid '80s, and you're still at it today. Um, I mean, that's some longevity that, like, you might be the only person standing that's left over from the 1980s that is still training.
I'm not training. I'm doing more keynoting right
Yeah.
now and
Well,
coaching.
we'll call you a guru. You're the wise man on the mountain we all climb up to have a conversation with.
I literally believe now that saying that we all have heard that I forgot more than what people know.
Probably that's probably true. So tell me about what you learned, and I know that's a lot. That's like the massive question to ask you, but just take the last 40 years, 30, 40 years, working with sales professionals in every capacity, whether it's training, coaching, or having doing keynotes in front of groups of people. What would you say are the core lessons that you learned that you've put into this book that help people do better at what their mission is? Like you said, that big thing that they want out there that gives them the tools that they need to go get that goal or go get that aspiration.
Well, the first thing is task versus purpose. I think that we're task driven animals. And we're so busy going through our tasks that at the end of the day, we celebrate that we checked them all off, but then sometimes we get a little dejected that we didn't move the needle forward. And so what I learned is being in motion is not the issue. Doing the right things that matter is the issue. And that's why that destination is so powerful. Because I don't believe that we challenge ourselves enough or whatever. Sometimes, and the reason the destination is so powerful, if you just look at the task of making that transaction, sometimes just talking about the transaction only gives you a little bit of power. But if you could expand it into some other areas you can impact, now you're adding additional value that maybe your competitors can't. But you can't do that if you don't ask the right questions to get into those conversations. And that's where most people are missing it. So I learned from my dad how to ask the right questions. Because if I was asking the wrong
Mhm.
question, it was not going to help me.
Right.
So, you got to ask the right questions and not about what I have to do, but what I want. Now, the other thing I learned is that we are emotional creatures. And it, like a strength, it can help us, but if it's overused, it becomes a weakness. Jeb, anything you say to me or do to me, all of a sudden I'm creating a story about it. What do you mean? How did you say that? Whatever. You and I are different human beings. Okay. If I'm talking to you, I can guarantee you that even though we know each other for a long time and we have similar values in business, I don't know if our values are really the same in personal life. We don't have that relationship, right? I really don't understand what makes you tick. Therefore, I could be using a word that is such an innocent word that all of a sudden triggers you because of something you went through in your life. So the point that I'm just trying to make to everybody, we're triggering people whether we know it or not, just by how we communicate. And if you don't ask questions that help you get closer to where someone wants to go and on the same wavelength, then you're at a disadvantage. So let me give you an example. A good question to ask if you're about to make a sales call. Okay. I'll ask a sales executive, what do you want to accomplish? Oh, we want to close a deal. I said, okay. What's your sales cycle? It usually takes 5 calls. What call is this? Number one. Oh, so your goal is to close the deal today. Yeah. I said, well, you're going to lose the deal. How's that? Because all you're going to do is close, close, close. You're not going to be asking the right questions. Now, if you said that the goal of today was to qualify whether or not this is a good deal for both of us and develop a path forward, now that's going to lead to a different set of actions because you're not going to be closing, closing, closing. You're going to be asking questions like, tell me, what are the 3 things that you need to get out of this for you to consider this was the best decision you ever made? Something like that. Or what are the 3 biggest challenges you're having in the next year that possibly we can help you impact? Whatever it is, that's where you're going into questions that I call are about on the business, not in the business, but on how you are looking to solve bigger problems. So for that salesperson, that person was not looking to close the deal in the first call. They were looking to qualify. If you're not going after the right thing, any and all roads will get you there, and you will probably fall short.
I'm curious. You talk about being in motion versus having a destination. In the book, you describe a concept called the pause method. How does the pause method help you stop that cycle and get out of this I don't know, this vortex you talk about of you're just not getting anywhere to I've got a destination and it means something to me. Can you tell us a little bit about the pause
Yeah,
method and how that works?
sure. So the pause is like the board meeting. That was a pause. That's like when you're in the middle of the thick and you realize it's not working, stop. If you realize you've done it a few times, stop because you're going to do it the same way and it's not going to work. You might as well spend some time to figure out how you can move forward. So I went and I paused and I said, okay, where do you want to be? I want to sell. What are you not doing? I'm not selling. All right, what are you talking about? Copiers. Well, maybe it's not strong enough. Can you talk about something else? And I guessed that communication. But then when I made that question, tell me, would you agree, copiers communication? Yes. Tell me the 3 biggest things impacting your communication. That's when she started, being vulnerable. That's what I'm talking about. Understanding what you're really selling, the outcome, and the outcome that they want, and then what's preventing them from getting there. Those are the types of questions you need to ask, not questions about your features and functions, because those are low level questions and it's about your task. It's not about them.
Let's take a step back and talk about you again for a minute. So you were at some point the president of the NSA. You're a member of National Speaker Association. I'm not a member of the National Speaker Association, although I'm a speaker. I'm just curious. You've been doing this for a long time. You say you're a keynote speaker. So, and this is kind of about me too. So I spent last year. I spent 283 nights on the road. Year before that, I was in the 280s. Then we had the pandemic years. Before the pandemic years, the 3 years before that, I was over 300 nights a year on the road, living in a hotel, going from audience to audience. This year's been the biggest year we've ever had. I've never experienced anything like I can't even remember January. How do you like manage that type of travel, that type of there's like no stopping, like it's just constant motion, moving to the next place. Over the years, how do you handle that? And all I want you to do is I want you to teach me something, but then relate that to you've got sales managers and sales leaders out there that are moving fast versus moving at speed. I get that. Um, how do you advise people in this crazy world, knowing what you've learned over the years, to manage that amount of it's hard to even explain. It's just exhaustion from doing so much for so many people.
It took a toll. Right now, that's not my game anymore. I do not want to be on the road 100, 200 nights a year, and I won't be. My body's slowed down. I'm 69. Where I can have the biggest impact is being on the road for 20, 30 dates, doing some keynotes at the right places, but then getting into some good partnerships with C-suite or CEOs or VPs of sales that are really looking to grow as an individual, but also grow their companies. That is the perfect fit for me to either do a coaching project or a retainer. And that's what I really like to do because that's when I can have impact on many more people. Because when you affect the influencer who then goes out and affects people that they're responsible for, I mean, you can have a lot more impact than just doing keynotes that is just awareness for an hour.
Makes sense. You said that velocity is not fast, but speed with a destination. W- Let's talk about the mindsets that allow you to step into that frame and out of the frame of just moving fast or being in motion.
Let me try and give you an example. You know Brian Tracy, right?
Hmm.
Brian Tracy is a top thought leader in the world, and he was on my board of directors when I was president of NSA. Anyway, I shared a story. Brian knows, and he laughs, and he goes, "Keep using it. It's a great story." Um, I did this talk at this Chicago conference, trade conference, and the following week, a VP of sales for a medical device company called me up and said, "Three of my regional managers heard you speak, and we're looking for a keynote speaker." I said, "Great." I said, "Who are you looking at?" He goes, "Brian Tracy." Now, this was in the late 90s, and Brian had more books written than I had years on this earth. So he had a bigger resume as a thought leader. And I'm going, there's no way I'm going to beat him as a keynote speaker when it's the breadth of what you've done. So I just asked him, "Do you mind me asking, when you had the salesman, what are the three most important things you're looking to address?" And all of a sudden he said, "Look, we have the best ear, nose, and throat machine according to all the magazines. We sell to ear, nose, and throat surgeons, but we can't sell it." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because our major competitor, Stryker, can't compete with it, so they make theirs, give it away for free, forcing us to make money on the consumables." I said, "So what do you want from me?" He goes, "We got $8 million there for free. I want it back, and I want to teach my people how to sell it." I said, "Then you need more in the keynote." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "There's three phases of adult education: awareness, which is what a keynote does; transference of skill, when you get more involved and you show them exactly how to do it; and then measurement of results, which gives the motivation." What I recommend is you pick three cities. Let me go into each city. Let me sit in the surgery, speak to the docs. Let me see the conversation they're having. Let me see if I can change the conversation. And then I can come to your national sales meeting and give the results. And he bought that. "But can you still do a keynote?" "Yeah, I'll still do a keynote." Well, anyway, he bought the whole package that was probably worth about 5 times what Tracy's keynote fee would have been. But I stopped playing the game against Tracy. I stopped playing the keynote game. And I went to one step further. What are the three things you need to accomplish? What's but They were $87 million cap on the exchange. Their goal was to use this new product, and it was going to be their mega product that gets them to the $1 billion in sell. They couldn't do it because they weren't selling it. We solved that problem. They were sold to Medtronic for $1 billion 4 years later.
Wow.
That's what I'm talking about. And that was a simple call. Oh, so we're in the surgery, right? It went as simple as this. I was an EMT, okay? So blood's not
Yeah.
going to freak me out. Surgeon's there. He's got the patient back there. He goes, "Hey, Ron, come over here." Pops the tonsil out to scare me. I said, "Is that all you got?" And he looks at me. "You didn't freak out?" I said, "I'm an EMT. Now I have my opening. Let me ask you a question." He goes, "What? What's your three biggest issues?" And the whole thing, Medicare takes too much. We can't get the insurance. We have to do more. We can only operate certain hours. I said, this solves you 7 minutes. It saves you 7 minutes. Yes. In a year, how many more cases can you operate on? All of a sudden, the money signs start clicking, and they say, "Okay, but get the admin to say yes because they have to buy it." I had the same conversation with the admin. All of a sudden, I didn't know this, but the salespeople are texting their friends, "You better listen to this guy because he's going to show you how to do it because he's changing the conversation right here and now." And all I did was just ask a better question.
How much does that have to do with what you call the psychology of influence in the Velocity Mindset book?
It has a lot because we look at three hormones that neuroscience has identified: cortisol, oxytocin, and dopamine. Cortisol is a fight or flight hormone. And one thing I teach in the book, before you even start having a conversation, you need to do work before you meet with that person on the phone or in person. You need to create a safe environment for them to want to talk. Because when you call them up, if you're not expected, you're raising the cortisol because you're interrupting them. If you're talking about things that are not important to them or you're wasting the time, you're raising the cortisol. Cortisol on a scale of 0 to 10, if they're at a 1 or 2, they're not turned off, but they're not really listening. You want them at a 3 to 5 where they engage, asking questions, and ready to move. You get to a 6, they start getting a little nervous and stop listening. 7, listen less. 8, 9, they turn you off. So if you go in to a conversation, let's say you're selling stocks and bonds, like we did with this major investment house, and you cold call on somebody and you say, I'm from so and so, and what are you doing with stocks and bonds? You're asking a status question. That call is always going straight up because you're trying to sell them something they want to protect themselves. But if you go with the question I gave them and you say, look, I'm not here about stocks and bonds, but I'm really here about your future. Can I ask you this one question? They say, what? When it comes to your future, what are the three things you want your money to provide for you? All of a sudden, the heavens open up, the information pours, and now you can have some concrete information. They brought me in, they had a class of 47-year veterans to teach this for 1 hour. And one guy called up two widowers that night, and he called me at 11 o'clock in my hotel room. They both had $100,000 to invest. They both didn't commit. 6 months they were working with him. He asked that question. One said, I'll give you an appointment to come in and have that conversation. The other one turned around that night and verbally agreed to give them their money. That's how fast this can work.
Wow.
So yeah, there are hormones we zero in on. How do you control and keep it in an area of your customers or prospects so they want to be engaged? And when they are engaged, they start trusting you a little bit. So they start giving you information. That's when you know the oxytocin starts kicking in. And because of that, they start feeling better. So that's the dopamine. That's the whole effect of that trio of hormones. And we actually do a role play on stage where we show it happening. We change the question, we interview the people, and they can actually see that transformation happening in front of their eyes. And when they can see it then they're more likely to try it in the field when they're out there by themselves.
Love it. Love it. Well, Ron, we are running out of time. I know you got to go, but folks, you want to learn more about the psychology of influence, the pause method, getting your own boardroom, learning how to find your destination, go check out Velocity Mindset by Ron Karr. And Karr is spelled with a K, folks, Karr. But you can pick up Velocity Mindset on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold. If you want to go check out Ron, go to ronkarr.com, ronkarr.com. Again, ronkarr.com. You can check out Ron on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I'm a big fan of your Instagram channel because you're putting up new videos all the time. So you can get even more of Ron there. And it's nice because these videos are like 1 to 2 minutes long, super high impact. Ron is he's a wealth of knowledge. And as he said, he probably knows more about, you probably forgot more about sales than you remember. Y'all go check out Ron. And folks, we've got the Outbound Conference coming up really soon. It's going to be in a brand new city that we haven't announced quite yet. But if you go to outboundconference.com, and you sign up, you will be the very first to know, and you'll have first dibs at discounted tickets. And make sure that you go check out Sales Gravy University at learn.salesgravy.com, learn.salesgravy.com. More than 75,000 salespeople and their companies use and leverage Sales Gravy University to grow, to learn, to sell more, to win more, to earn more. And if you've never taken a course, use the code FREECOURSE at learn.salesgravy.com. We'll see you next time on the Sales Gravy Podcast. Hey, I'm doing a happy dance because you watched this video. Make sure that you click like and subscribe so that you never miss one of our amazing sales training videos.